In my review of the new Speed Legend MP a month ago, I talked about how excited I was to see how this new technology high bore would work in the rest of their lineup. Well, today we're going to talk about how it performs in the brand new Speed Legend Pro. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets and Runners. So I'm super excited to talk about this racket because I think it's such a great update. But before that, I do want to do a little something different that I haven't really done on this channel before. Novak Djokovic endorses this racket, and I think we're finally starting to see him decline a little bit, but we've witnessed something absolutely remarkable with him over the last 20 years. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit and also explain some of the appreciation I've developed for him. I know it's different to just reviewing the racket, but hopefully you enjoy, and if you don't want to listen to this, you can totally skip to the review. I'll add a chapter in the scroll bar down there. So it's taken me years to kind of develop my opinion about Novak Djokovic because I was a fan of Roger Federer growing up, so he caused me a lot of heartbreak, and when you're a kid, you don't like that very much. But at this point, I've developed a huge amount of respect for Djokovic. For me, Djokovic represents near perfection, not just in tennis, but as an athlete in general. I don't think there are many like him in the history of sports. What makes that most impressive for me is that he hasn't always had it easy. That path to perfection involved incredibly hard work. He also had to reinvent himself as a player and as a person, and he had to break the status quo. He came onto the scene as an underdog compared to the two guys that had already been established in Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, and breaking that duopoly was even harder because they were universally beloved. They had such distinct styles that people really appreciated. Federer embodied elegance and Nadal was the ultimate grinder, and those are two things that people absolutely love to watch. Blood, sweat, and tears on one side, beauty on the other. Djokovic didn't really have that clear-cut style, and his personality was arguably even harder to mesh with. He was prone to outbursts. He went through that period of time where he was imitating players, which kind of rubbed people the wrong way, so people didn't really know what to make of him. It was kind of like, okay, well, we got these two guys, we really like them, now this other guy's coming in and disrupting everything, and we don't really like him, so he wasn't very well loved like the other two. I think at some point, Djokovic realized he would never be Rafa or Roger, and that that's fine. He's different, but he had to find his style, and while it's not as blatantly obvious, I think there's really only one word we can use to describe Djokovic now. He's a winner. Don't get me wrong, Federer and Nadal are winners too, but Djokovic has done everything in his power to make it so that if anyone is arguing between the three of them, it's really, really difficult not to say Djokovic. He has the most Grand Slams, he has the winning head-to-head against both of them, he has the Olympic gold, the ATP finals, and the most time spent as world number one, so he is the ultimate winner on paper. But for me, limiting it to those numbers oversimplifies it way too much. You see, after beating world number 4 Taylor Fritz at the age of 38, Djokovic qualified for the US Open semifinals, where he would play Alcaraz, and then if he won that match, he would most likely play Sinner. Those two players back-to-back is one of the toughest challenges in sports right now, but I really believed if anyone could do it, it was him. Now, the fact that he lost is besides the point. What matters is that we thought he could win, because throughout his career, he's consistently overcome the craziest odds. He's kind of created this idea that he's invincible. But how has he gotten to that point? Well, for me, Djokovic has developed this sort of three-pronged approach to dominating his opponent. It's sort of like his own powerful trident, and it involves mental fortitude, technical perfection, and fight. I could literally pick dozens of examples where he showed a complete mastery of those three characteristics, but for me, there are two matches that stand out more than any others: the 2012 Australian Open Final and the 2019 Wimbledon Final. We all know that the 2012 Australian Open Final is one of the greatest tennis matches of all time, and that was always likely to happen when prime Rafa and prime Djokovic played each other. Both of them had basically made a career off of never missing a ball, especially in important moments, and it felt like every single second of that match was an important moment. It was a total thriller from minute 1 to hour 5 and 53 minutes. So after almost 6 hours of some of the most grueling ball striking we're probably ever going to see, Djokovic rolled a forehand past Nadal and won the 2012 Australian Open Final. For me, that match showcased all three of Djokovic's best attributes, starting with his technique. It was nearly perfect that day, and in a recent interview on the Serve podcast, Nadal actually described Djokovic as the best ball striker he's ever seen. This is the quote: "In terms of ball striking, I think he's the best player I ever played and ever saw." And he wasn't talking specifically about the AO final, but it holds up. Djokovic has consistently demonstrated that he has a complete mastery over where he places the tennis ball in any situation. Now, the other thing that's glaringly obvious is that to play 6 hours of tennis against Rafael Nadal and end up winning the match must take a level of mental fortitude that I can't even imagine. And then there's the fight. In this match, he fought against the crowd, he fought against cramps, fatigue, and pain, he fought a consistent internal battle with himself, and he fought against Rafael Nadal, and he won the fight. You know, a lot of people say that Djokovic was in his prime in 2011, and I really believe that that 2012 Australian Open final was pretty much the perfect culmination of the player he had worked so hard to become. That match really was a demonstration that he'd achieved the best balance of technique, mental fortitude, and fight that the sport had probably ever seen. I'm not sure he actually reached as perfect of a level again in his career, but that's part of the beauty with Djokovic's trident. When one thing's off, the others compensate, and that's where the 2019 Wimbledon final comes in. It's not a match I remember very fondly, but it's also probably the one where I finally came to the conclusion, okay, there's something just different about this guy. Now, what's funny is that even Djokovic will tell you his technique or his actual tennis wasn't perfect that day. It was good, of course, it's still Djokovic, but in an interview afterwards, he said that Federer actually played the better tennis, but at the end of the day, Djokovic still won. That's because Djokovic won by using his two other attributes, mental fortitude and fight, to play the man, not the odds, something that he became exceptionally good at doing in the latter stages of his career. There's a reason I chose the word fight instead of resilience to describe Djokovic. He's always had this fire burning inside of him. It's a sort of chaos and a friction with himself, with his opponent, with something else. And we may not all love it about him, but it's who he is. And nothing represents that need for a fight better than his relationship with the crowd on center court against Roger Federer. There's no two ways around it. Against that man on that patch of grass, Djokovic just doesn't have that much support. And that was glaringly obvious when Federer went up 2 match points and the whole crowd stood up ready to start celebrating. But that's not a problem for Djokovic. In fact, it's quite the opposite. That's actually something that would have bothered him at the beginning of his career, but this is part of his unmatched ability to learn from something, use it, and then become 10 times better because of that. Having a crowd of people against you would make most people angry, and when most people get angry, we start shaking, we get tight, we make irrational decisions, and that doesn't translate very well to performing on a tennis court. But Djokovic has proven time and time again that that's not how he reacts to anger, and he is angry. It's not like he doesn't get angry, but he feeds off of that anger. It gives him this burning desire to fight against the adversity, and he certainly did in this match. But it's not as easy as just bam, Djokovic gets angry, Djokovic wins. He still has to find a way to win 2 points on Federer's serve on a court that Federer basically dominated for half a decade. This is where Djokovic's mind became his ultimate weapon. Good players can control their minds so that they encourage themselves when they do something good and then reassure themselves when they don't. But Djokovic takes it 10 steps farther. His mental power is so strong that his opponents feel it, and Djokovic knows that. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about play the man, not the odds. That's what's made Djokovic so unbeatable against average players on tour. No matter how good things may look, those players know that Djokovic is inevitable. He's probably gonna win in the end. But Federer isn't an average player on tour. He's an all-time great. But that day, he felt the full force of Djokovic's mental fortitude. You see, up a match point against Djokovic at a slam, he'd been there before, it didn't end well, and Djokovic knew he was thinking about it. You could tell it was weighing on him. After a decent serve +1, he rushed up to the net, trying to end things quickly without really having control of the rally, but Djokovic passed him with a winner that grazed the line, and that was pretty much it. After that, Federer capitulated. He lost the mental battle, but it was a fight against the strongest mind in sports history, which I have zero doubts about, because you don't just do that to Roger Federer. Now, there are so many other matches I could recount: the Olympics against Alcaraz, the 2021 Roland Garros semifinal against Rafa, even a match he lost, the 2021 US Open final, which was just proof that he's still a human. I won't get into any more, but what I will say is at the end of the day, tennis is a simple game. It's you and your opponent playing until one person wins and the other loses. It doesn't really matter how you get there, but what we know for sure is that there's no player in history that can play that game better than Novak Djokovic. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I love reviewing rackets, but it is kind of fun to mix it up once in a while and talk about something different. So if you did enjoy that, drop a like on the video. But now let's go back to talking about this brand new Speed Legend Pro. First, I'm gonna go over the specs of this racket so you can just have them in your head. And by the way, the mold hasn't changed coming from the previous Speed Legend Pro, which for those of you who don't know is just a much better looking standard Speed Pro. This racket has a 100 square inch head size, it weighs 310 grams, it has a constant 23 millimeter beam, an 18 by 20 string pattern, a 31 centimeter balance, and a strung stiffness of 61 RA, which is +1 compared to the previous Speed Pro. There has been one major spec change though, the swing weight. They lowered it, which I'll talk way more about later, but the biggest change they've made coming from the previous one is actually to the layup of the racket. Like with the Speed Legend MP, Head has introduced their latest and greatest layup technology, high bore. And if you did watch the Speed MP review, you'll know that I was a very big fan of that update, but I couldn't help but think it might be even better in the Pro. But first of all, what is high bore? Well, high bore is a hybrid composite material that combines boron and carbon fiber. It's very light, but it's also a very strong and resilient material. The idea with high bore technology is to increase stability without increasing weight, which is basically what every brand is trying to do these days. And it certainly worked well on the Legend MP. That racket was more stable than the previous one, and it also felt like it had a more forgiving sweet spot. But I want to talk more about that big sweet spot, because a big sweet spot is generally a byproduct of these stabilization layups, and not always in a good way. A big sweet spot is great to create a forgiving and artificially stable feeling racket, but it also means less ball feel, less precision, and just generally less of a connection between the player and the racket. Two big examples of this would be Wilson with the Clashes technology and Yonex with vibration dampening mesh. Both those technologies do their job in increasing stability by expanding the sweet spot, but they also create pretty mushy and muted feeling rackets. That's what's so special about high bore and the Speed MP for me. Yes, it expanded the sweet spot, yes, it made the racket more stable, but it didn't do it at the expense of too much ball feel. What high bore does better than most other stabilization technologies is that it still generates some sort of positive feedback when you make perfect contact. Definitely not in a traditional way like you would get on a Prestige or a Gravity, but that feedback is there. So I was super excited to test the Speed Pro for two reasons. One, I wanted to see if that high bore would feel even better in an 1820. And two, I wanted to see if it could fix one of the Speed Pro's biggest issues, its clunkiness. As good as the feel is with high bore on the Speed MP, there is still some ambiguity there. It can be a little bit launchy in certain situations, and that's just a byproduct of having a bigger sweet spot. Now, the 18 by 20 string pattern on the Speed Pro would theoretically be the perfect solution for that, because 1820s act boardier than 1619s. That boardiness means they'll have less of that big sweet spot feel because they're less forgiving on off-center hits. But the flip side of that is that they also have better feel in the sweet spot. Basically, 1820s just force everything into the sweet spot a little more. That's exactly how this Speed Pro feels. You get all those benefits of high bore with the really unique positive vibrations that it provides in the middle of the sweet spot, but with fewer of the downsides. The sweet spot does feel a little bit more forgiving, which does help to make the racket more stable, but the boardiness of the denser string bed basically neutralizes that mushier feel on the outsides of the sweet spot. Now, of course, it's still a Speed Pro, it has that thicker beam, so it doesn't have that same perfectly pure ball feel of something like a Gravity Pro or another super classic racket. But I do really like it, and the big thing to understand is that compared to the previous one, it is a little more crisp, a little bit less muted, and also more forgiving, so they really nailed the layup with this racket, which is super cool. Now, you all know how much I love talking about feel, but this time I'm actually more excited to talk about maneuverability, because I got so excited with high bore tech when I saw how much more stable it made the Speed MP, because that meant it could help solve the Speed Pro's biggest problem. I love the concept of a Speed Pro. You know, a more powerful, more spin-friendly 1820 sounds great, but at 310 grams with a 335 swing weight, a pretty thick 23 millimeter beam, and a 100 square inch head size, I've always found that racket way too clunky. I like accelerating my racket face quickly through contact, so thick with a big head size and a high swing weight, that basically makes it feel like a hammer. But the whole idea with high bore tech is stability without too much weight. So the question was, could they lower the swing weight? Yes, they did, which is the best news ever. Great news, super mega great news. Super mega fast! They lowered the swing weight, finally. It was pushing the high 330s on the previous one. This one was swinging at 327, and I tested a few other of the new Speed Pros, and that's right around what I think the target swing weight is, which I could not be happier about. The difference, bringing it down from 330 plus to this, I actually can't understate how big of a difference this is. There has been a massive change to this racket's swing speed and just general usability. It was so clunky before that not only did I think you had to be a good player to use it, but you also had to be a very particular kind of player. If you like any sort of quick and easy acceleration from your racket, it just wasn't possible to use. It's still not a fast racket, but it isn't noticeably sluggish anymore. I would compare this to something like the current T-Fight 305S. It's never gonna win a maneuverability battle, but also not a racket I'd avoid if you're really worried about swing speed. And this helps all around the court, by the way, not just on ground strokes. It's quicker up at the net, it's easier to serve with, especially second serves because you can brush up a little easier. So this is just a huge, huge improvement. This is the definition of using modern technology to improve a racket's inherent flaw. And the best thing is they've basically done this with zero downsides, like I was talking about in the feel section. Sometimes modern technology leads to overcorrection. There's no overcorrection whatsoever. This is still totally true to a Speed Pro. It's just easier to use and open to more styles. And if you do like the high swing weight, you can always add lead. Now I just said this is still true to a Speed Pro, but what does that actually mean? Well, the Speed Pro I've talked about many times on this channel, but it's actually a very special racket. You look at it and it looks a little bit more like a modern spin and power oriented racket. It has a pretty thick beam, although it is a constant beam, and then it doesn't really have a classic silhouette, especially here in the throat. But then it has the 18x20 string pattern, which changes it completely, especially compared to the Speed MP. That does give it an element of control and consistency that you would associate with more classic rackets. Basically, what that does is create a racket that's super consistent like a classic racket, but then it's much more powerful and less flexy than something truly traditional like the Gravity Pro, which it is directly comparable to. So it's actually a very cool racket because it has that inherent power, but then it also gives you the confidence you want with an 1820 where you can just whack at the ball and you know it's gonna stay in. It has a significantly lower launch angle than the Speed MP. It's much more precise as well. Again, it's not a laser because of that thicker beam, but it is truly a jack of all trades, which is funny because it's different to the Speed MP, but that's also how I would describe it. I think the biggest difference between the two, and this is more true now than ever, would be which you prioritize between spin and control. They're both extremely well-rounded, but the Speed MP has more spin and the Speed Pro has more control. The fact that they have lowered the swing weight so significantly this year makes that choice between the two actually much more difficult. I used to recommend the Speed MP in almost every situation, but now I'd really consider the Pro. It's still not quite as easy to use as the MP, but it is much closer. And I actually think that the spin didn't necessarily improve, but that's one part of the playability that has gotten so much easier to access now. Spin was hard to generate with the last one, not because it's not a spin-friendly racket, but just because it took so much effort to generate racket head speed. It's so much easier to brush up on the ball with that windshield wiper motion now. And despite this being an 1820, spin is actually really, really good. It's one of the most open 1820s out there, and that thicker beam does help to generate a little bit more easy spin. So basically, with this version, the Speed MP has remained a phenomenally well-rounded racket, and the Pro has just gotten a little bit closer to it, so picking between the two is going to be harder than ever. I still think most people should go for the MP just because of how tennis is nowadays. Spin is more prevalent than flatter control, but you can still do both with either racket. It's just which one do you want the racket to be better at? So yeah, just an awesome update to the Speed Pro. I do personally prefer quicker rackets, but both these speeds have made me extremely excited to see what Hybor Tech is gonna do in the rest of their lineup. With that said, that is going to be the end of this review. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, if you do want to demo the brand new Speed Pro, you can come visit us in store, or if you want to buy it, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.